Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I'm with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapters 7, 8, and 9 of Calendar Mysteries, July Jitters. Written by Ron Roy, illustrated by John Stephen Gurney, published by Random House, New York. Chapter 7. The Police Join the Search. "Where have you been?" Ruth Rose asked, glaring at Nate. "We've looked for you kids all over town." "You had us worried," Dink said, giving his cousin a look. "You were supposed to stay with us," Josh said. "But we were looking for Polly and Pal," Bradley said. "We searched all over town, but we can't find them." "We've been looking too," Josh said. So do you know who won the mayor's contest?" Brian asked his older brother. Josh grinned. "Your teacher, Mr. Verray," he said. "He dressed his parrot like King George." "Rats!" Nate said. Bradley headed for the house. "We have to call Officer Fallon," he said over his shoulder. "I don't care about the contest anymore. My pony and dog are missing." All 7 kids crowded into the kitchen. Josh poured glasses of water for everyone while Bradley looked up the number and dialed. When he heard Officer Fallon's voice, Bradley explained what had happened to Polly and Pal. He told him how they had dressed them for the contest. "No, I'm not joking," Bradley said. Bradley listened, then hung up. "No one has called in about Polly or Pal," he said, "but Officer Fallon said we should put up a bunch of signs around town. He said if we bring him pictures of Polly and Pal, he'll make a bunch of copies for us." "That's a good idea," Ruth Rose said. "That way everyone in town will know they're missing and start looking." "Okay, you kids go see Officer Fallon," Josh said. "Dink and Ruth Rose and I will go knocking on doors." 10 minutes later, Bradley and Brian, Nate and Lucy climbed the steps to the police station. Bradley had found a nice picture of Polly and Pal together. It showed them near the barn. The kids found Officer Fallon sitting at his desk, sipping from a glass of lemonade. A plate of cookies sat on a pile of papers. "Come on in, gang," the police chief said. "Grab a cookie and park yourselves over there." He pointed to a long sofa. "So you've misplaced your pets, huh?" The kids each took a cookie and sat on the couch. "They ran away," Bradley said. "We were getting them dressed for the mayor's contest and they just took off." Officer Fallon grinned and tugged on his mustache. "Maybe they didn't like their outfits." Bradley stood and showed him the picture of Polly and Pal near the barn. "Is this good enough to make copies?" he asked. Officer Fallon reached across his desk and took the picture. "It's perfect," he said. "Give me a few minutes." He got up and left the room, then stuck his head back in the door. "And don't steal my cookies or I'll have to put you in jail." Nate giggled. After Officer Fallon left, he whispered, "I wonder if he counted them." "Don't even think about taking another one," Bradley said. "Where should we bring the pictures?" Lucy asked. "All up and down Main Street," Brian said. Nate was wandering around the police chief's office. "Don't touch anything," Bradley whispered. "I'm not," Nate said. He stopped in front of a row of pictures of wanted criminals from around the state and the country. "Look at these guys. I'm glad none of them live in Greenlawn." Brian ran over to look. "Murderers and robbers and kidnappers," he said, shivering. "Guys, you don't suppose someone kidnapped Polly and Pal, do you?" Lucy asked. 3 pairs of big eyes stared at her. Chapter 8. They're really gone. "But I saw them running away," Bradley said. "Besides, who'd kidnap a pony and a big fat basset hound?" "This guy would," Nate said. He tapped one of the wanted pictures. "He's big enough to pick both of them up and carry them away." "But you're forgetting one thing," Brian said. "That guy's not in Greenlawn." "How do you know he's not?" Nate whispered. "He could be hiding in your basement. He could be waiting for you to go to sleep so he can creep up." Just then Officer Fallon walked back into the room. All 4 kids jumped. "What's the matter?" Officer Fallon asked. "You look like you've seen a monster." "We have," Bradley said, grinning at Nate. "Here's a bunch of pictures," Officer Fallon said, handing the pile to Bradley. "I added some stuff on the bottom." Bradley read from the top photo. "Polly the pony and Pal the pooch are lost. If you see them, call the police chief for a reward. 860-555-1007. We don't have any money for a reward, Brian said. I do, Officer Fallon said. He winked. Now go out and paper the town with those pictures. The kids thanked Officer Fallon and hurried back outside. Bradley handed each of them some pictures and kept the rest for himself. Let's walk up Main Street and hand one to everyone we see, he said. All the stores, too. We'll meet in front of the library when we run out of pictures, okay? Nate, you and I will take this side of Main Street, Brian said. Brad, you and Lucy hit the other side. With the plan and a pile of pictures, the kids took off. Bradley and Lucy walked to the gas station first. They found the owner, Mr. Holly, fixing a flat tire. His face was smudged with grease marks. Hey, kids, what's up? The jolly man said. Our pony and dog ran away and we're looking for them, Bradley said. He handed Mr. Holly a picture of Polly and Pal. Golly, Polly is lost, Mr. Holly said. If they stop in, I'll give the police a call. The kids thanked him and ran next door to Book Nook. Mr. Paskey took a picture as well and hung it in the front window. He promised to keep an eye peeled for the missing pets. Across the street, Bradley could see Nate and Brian coming out of the Green Lawn Savings Bank. He waved, and they waved back. Howard's barber shop is next, Lucy said. Good, Bradley said. Howard can hand pictures out to his customers. Pretty soon, Bradley and Lucy were almost out of pictures. Bradley had given his last one to Ron Penowski. Mr. P, as the kids called him, owned Ron's bait shop. He promised to watch out for Polly and Pal. Well, I guess we go to the library and wait for the other guys, Bradley said. I can't believe no one saw Polly. I saved one picture for the library, Lucy said. The librarian can show it to everyone who checks out a book. Great idea, Bradley said. When they reached the library, Lucy went inside with the picture. Bradley sat on the steps. While he waited, he thought about Polly and Pal. Where would they go? Were they hiding on purpose? Had they been kidnapped as Lucy had suggested? Did they decide to go off on an adventure like that mouse, Stuart Little? Lucy came out of the library and sat next to Bradley. She's going to show the picture to all her patrons, she said. Bradley nodded. He couldn't look at Lucy because he had tears in his eyes. Maybe they ran away for good, he whispered. Chapter 9. Never Give Up. No, they didn't, Lucy said. They have to be somewhere in Greenlawn. We can't give up, Bradley. Just then, Brian and Nate came loping past Town Hall. They were out of breath and out of pictures. Well, we did all we could, Brian said. Now I guess we just have to hope someone calls Officer Fallon. The 4 kids flopped on the grass under a tree. You're right, Lucy, Bradley said. We can't give up on this. But we've looked everywhere, Brian said. My brain is tired. What brain? Bradley teased, tickling his brother under the arm. Brian threw a handful of grass at Bradley. Ponies and dogs aren't stupid, Bradley said, wiping pieces of grasses off his t-shirt. Nobody said they were, Brian said. So what? So they wouldn't just wander around, Bradley went on. They'd have a plan. Yeah, only they didn't bother to tell us what it is, Nate said. What do they both like to do? Bradley asked. What did Polly and Pal like better than anything? Food, the other 3 kids yelled, and they all laughed. Right, Bradley said. So who do we know who gives food to animals? We do, Brian said. No, I mean other people, Bradley said. Dr. Henry, the vet, does, Nate said. And Mrs. Wong at the pet shop, Brian said. She even feeds squirrels and pigeons. Did anyone bring them a picture of Polly and Pal? Nate asked. Bradley and I tried at Dr. Henry's, but he wasn't there, Lucy said. The place was closed. We stopped at the Furry Feet pet shop, but Mrs. Wong's shop was closed too, Brian said. Well, I think we should try them again, Bradley said. They both keep a lot of pet food around. Polly and Pal would smell it. We've tried everything else, Brian said. Let's go. The kids hiked back across Main Street up East Green Street. They tried the front door of Dr. Henry's office, but it was locked. They walked all around the building. Bradley checked the ground for hoof prints. Okay, let's go to Furry Feet, he said. The Furry Feet pet shop was on the corner of Main and Oak Streets. The kids stood in front of the shop, peering through the glass. They saw kittens, fish, and hamsters. No pony, no basset hound. "The note's still on the door," Nate said. He read it. "At the petting zoo." Bradley stared at the note. "Remember when we saw Dr. Henry this morning on the way to the parade?" he asked the others. "He said he was going to help out at the petting zoo. And this note says Mrs. Wong is there too." "The vet said there was a party there for the animals today," Lucy said. "Right. Now I remember," Bradley said. He looked at the other kids. "If there's a party for animals, there'll be food for animals. We should check it out." The kids cut across Oak Street and past People's Pond. They hurried past the police station, library, and senior center. "Wow, the place is crowded," Nate said. Hundreds of people were at the children's petting zoo and aquarium. Almost everyone had a pet with them. Many of the kids had party hats on. There was a lot of noise from the animals and the people. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. "Look, there's Mr. Neater," Brian said. He waved at a tall man with white hair. Mr. Neater used to be the janitor at their school. Now he worked as a volunteer at the petting zoo. Mr. Neater was holding his rabbit, Douglas. "Hey kids, welcome to the party," Mr. Neater said. "It's our own 4th of July celebration." The kids looked around. They saw Mrs. Wong talking to some children while she fed baby ducks. Dr. Henry was there too. He was showing some kids how to brush a lamb's wool. "Your pony and dog are here somewhere," Mr. Neater said. "They are?" Bradley asked. "Didn't you know?" Mr. Neater asked. "We've been looking for them for hours," Bradley said. "They ran away from the parade." "Goodness, they've been here all this time," Mr. Neater said. "My friends Ted and Sally have been watching them. We were wondering why you kids weren't here too." Bradley laughed. "We've been running all over town," he said. "Follow me," Mr. Neater said, carrying Douglas in his arms. Mr. Neater led the kids over to a small barn. Lots of people were there, feeding a flock of goats and some chickens. Polly was being brushed by an elderly couple. A little girl was feeding her carrots and apples. Polly looked very happy. Pal lay on the ground next to Polly's feet. He was watching some baby chicks pecking in the grass. "Polly looks like a pony again," Bradley said. Mr. Neater laughed. "Oh, yes. We got rid of that funny wig and hat," he said. He looked at the kids. "Let me guess. You dressed them for the mayor's contest, right?" Bradley nodded. "Yeah, and they hated it," he said. "I think that's why they ran away. They look happy now," Lucy said. "I still want to be mayor for a day," Brian grumped. "It was going to be so cool." Bradley put his arm around his twin brother's shoulder. "When you grow up, you can run for mayor," he said. "No one would vote for me," Brian said. "I would," Nate said. "Me too," Lucy added. "And I definitely would vote for you, bro," Bradley said. Polly whinnied and Pal barked. "See? Even Polly and Pal would vote for you," Bradley said. He walked over and hugged his pets. "And no more costume contests for you two, I promise," he whispered. The end. Thank you. Goodbye.